Welcome to the family. As you come and hang out with us, you will see a few rhythms we have. For instance, on first Sundays of the month, we usually have communion. And whenever there's a fifth Sunday, we do more of a family service and typically get to celebrate baptisms and child dedications. In between sermon series, we have what are called Vision Sundays, where we highlight local and global outreach initiatives and workers. And on the second Sunday of each month, we do a church family generosity update. I know we have some new family members, so here are 3 things that are good for you to know for context. 1, we only focus on the general operations fund and helping hands. We do not track the quite large amount our church family gives directly to global and local workers and endeavors. For example, we just announced that the short-term missions trip with the young adults in Tijuana is officially fully funded. Yet again, that money does not touch our general operations fund. So praise God, more updates on them coming soon. Another thing good to know is we're fueled by faith. We believe we are doing ministry at the level God has called us to. And then the last thing is we are expecting a deficit. Our general operations fund has an aspirational but realistic giving goal. Likely, we should be going negative month to month. Although general operations numbers always seem to trend negative, compared to previous years, our budget is larger and the generosity tab is growing. And we also believe God's plan does not lack God's provision. So we just closed March, so let's take a look. In March, we were negative $4,140, bringing our yearly deficit to $45,926. Now, I know I live a wildly optimistic life, but compared to other years and with a larger budget, this is really not bad. For a frame of reference, last year in March with this year's budget, we would be negative almost double that at $90,871. I just want to remind people that generosity at Tab is growing. Now, the Helping Hands, our benevolence fund, continues to grow as we now have $42,612 raised and $31,328 used for various church, family, and community needs. So thank you, Tab family, for your generosity to that fund, as well as all the global workers and other ministries that you give directly to. Endeavors like the La Paz trip and Gift to Christ are all fun to give to, and we celebrate them when the funds are raised. We circle back and see stories of how the funds were used, but none of this is possible without the general operations fund. In different capacities, these ministries depend on the staff, systems, facilities, and infrastructure that the general operations fund supports. So right now we are between church-wide outreach endeavors, and we thought it would be good to take some time and put some attention on supporting the general operations fund. Now, generosity is not about God needing our money, but about living a life of freedom. By viewing our resources as blessings to be shared, we open ourselves to God's provision and experience a life of freedom from material entrapments. I do not know about you, but personally, I'm too broke to not give to God. If you have not given before or want to learn more about biblical generosity, which expands much further than just finances, you can find resources at tabchurch.org/give. All right, to my Resurrection Sunday new family members, welcome back. And as I said, you are now family. Now, last week we gave you 5 arguments as to why it would be a good decision to join a community that cares about you, including personal support, spiritual growth, and cute babies. So if you're still testing this out and I'm not convinced yet, let me give you 3 more arguments. Argument 6. Sermons. I'm excited we got someone much smarter than myself spending time to prepare a message for us to dissect and use to better align ourselves with God's will for our lives each and every week. Argument 7. Seniors. Did you not grow up with a grandparent close by? Do not worry, I got about 40 of them for you, but approach with caution. These are not your usual seniors. Argument 8 is a little weird, but just track with me. So Pastor Craig needs people to sing to. We all know that he wants to be a singer. I do not need to be the only person for him to sing to or sing with or sing at. So come join us so Craig's dream can come true and he can have more people to sing to so I can go home at like a normal time, if that makes sense. Little backstory, we used to be in a boy band, AGT, whole 9 yards. It was a great thing, but that's behind us. I was ready to move on. Craig was not. It is what it is. This is where we are now. If you come back next week, I'll give you 3 more arguments, one in which might get me fired, but personally, I think it's worth it. All right, we are starting a brand new book study in Ecclesiastes. Craig, if you're ready, I'm ready. Go do your thing.
I've been dreaming for this moment for all my life. Oh, Lord.
That is so good. Golly. Okay, it's time to get serious, people. I don't know. All right, I'm Pastor Craig. If I haven't had the opportunity to meet you, I would really like that opportunity to kind of clarify some of that stuff on the video, okay? So please don't ignore me in the hallway. Good to have you. If you are returning from Easter, it's so good to have you. If you're a first-time guest, thank you for being here today. And I do want to just put my just blessing, I don't know if that's the right word, but just excitement, maybe that's the word, on Leader Path. And so we just talked a lot about the next opportunity. If you're looking for a next step, at Tab, Leader Path it's the best opportunity. So next week we're starting that. And I just want to encourage you to take that step. You will be blessed. I want to thank Daniel Bridges. He's really the architect and has put so much thought and prayer into Leader Path. Pastor Will leads one of those groups, so you'll be so blessed by doing that. Please take that opportunity. All right, today we are starting a brand new sermon series through the book of Ecclesiastes, okay? And you might be thinking, man, why Ecclesiastes? That's such a random book in the Old Testament. And this is not a therapy session, so I won't divulge too much. But I think I've shared, last year was just one of those years in ministry that was, it was just a tough year, And I think all of us probably have ebbs and flows in our life. I talked to, various pastor friends that I have, and I think there's just seasons where it's like we kind of feel like we're in the pressure cooker of life a little bit, and we've got temptation coming at us, we've got difficult things coming at us, and sometimes we go through those seasons of life. And that's kind of how 2005 was from beginning to end. And towards the end of 2005, as the Lord would have it, I was just going and kind of thinking through what book do I want to personally study through. And I ended the year, last year, 2005, of going through 2025, sorry. Man, I feel like it's 2005. 2025, yeah, there you go. I ended the year going through Ecclesiastes. And man, the Lord it just was such a refreshing book. You go through this book, as we'll take the next several weeks to look at these kind of key themes of life, and just hearing the teacher. That's the way that the author of Ecclesiastes describes himself, and we'll talk about authorship here in just a second. But the teacher, he just goes through all these themes of life, and there's nothing that he leaves off of the table. And it's just refreshing to be able to go to the Bible, and the Bible is a very authentic, honest book. And it does have it has all of the answers that we need in life. And even if those things aren't specific, it just points us back to a good and a faithful God that even in the valleys of life, even in those questions of life that we don't understand how all these things are being pieced together, it's refreshing to be able to come to the scriptures and be reminded that we do serve a good and a faithful God who meets us in all of those things and walks with us, doesn't abandon us when we're going through those challenging times of life. And Ecclesiastes was just such a refreshment to me. So I hope it will be to us as we take the next several weeks and look through this book. So I want us to do something a little bit different. We're actually going to look at the bookends of Ecclesiastes today. And so as I was looking at the letter, and I've been studying it for a couple months now, trying to make sense of how best to lay this book out, because there are some themes in the book that it's like, does the author, what's their relationship with God even like? Like, it seems like they're saying some things that just, should this even be in the Bible? And it's like, man, how do you make sense of all these themes that are in the book of Ecclesiastes? And I think what the author of Ecclesiastes is doing If you look over the course of the entire book, and here's why we're going to look at the beginning of the book today, and we're going to look at the end of the book today, because I believe that the author of Ecclesiastes is really given us a window frame of sorts, and he's pointing us to look through this window frame of life, and he's inviting us, he's challenging us even. Look at all the incongruities of life. Look at all the things of life that doesn't make sense, right? As Christ followers, sometimes I feel like we kind of buy into this idea that we have to present, we have to put a Band-Aid on things. We have to, show that we've got it all together, right? And yes, the Lord comes in and transforms our heart, and absolutely, we have a hope and we have a joy about us that should be unshakable, right? Even when we feel like life is shaking a bit. But that doesn't mean that we don't have to be honest about the things that we're going through in life, especially with the community of faith. So if you're here today and you're not a Christ follower and you're stepping in, you might be wondering, what's the benefit of church really? What's the benefit of being a part of a Christian community? And one of the greatest benefits of being a part of a Christian community is when a group of Christ followers can be authentic and know that we are for one another and we're helping each other navigate through the difficulties of life. That is one of the most tremendous blessings of church. So if we stop at our involvement in a service on a Sunday, we're missing 90% of what this is really all about. Because as we go through those ebbs and flows of life, we have other people that are there that can support us, that can walk with us, that can help us navigate those things as the Lord is doing His work in us and through us. All right? So what I want us to consider is we're looking at this window frame. In the middle part of the book of Ecclesiastes, there's highs and lows to it. But yes, there's going to be some topics that we go into that we discuss. And one of the main phrases that we see throughout the book of Ecclesiastes is this word meaningless. The author of Ecclesiastes is just putting it on the table, and he's saying, man, so much of life just seems like it's pretty pointless. I liked how Pastor Will said last week, he brought something out of the King James Version, and I was like, man, that is awesome right there. Listen to how the King James puts Ecclesiastes 1:2. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. Y'all glad you woke up today? That makes you feel pretty good, right? So what we have in this book is we'll see as the preacher, the teacher begins on one side of the window frame, on the one end of the bookend of life. He's like, yes, there's this reality of life that you can't deny. So much of life just seems futile. So much of life is just extremely frustrating. You rake up the leaves out of the yard, and 2 days later, the leaves are right back where you raked them up. You mow the lawn, and next week, the grass is right back where you mowed it the previous week. And it's like, man, what's the point? I just shouldn't have mowed the lawn. But then the neighbors don't really you know what I'm saying. But that's one of the frames of the window. He's saying, we just have to come to terms with the fact that, man, life can be very, very futile. It can be very, very frustrating. And the author is going to use this phrase time and time again throughout this letter that you need to jot down, because it's one of the key phrases to keep in mind as we think about the meaningless, the vanity of life. He uses this phrase time and time again, life under the sun, S-U-N. Life under the sun can just beat you down. life under the sun can be extremely frustrating. You feel like you're taking 2-3 steps forward, and then before you know it, you're taking 2 or 3 steps back, and it's like, man, am I making any progress? Because it just doesn't feel like that is the case. And that's one of the realities, is he's looking through this window into all the incongruities of life. That's one of the key windows that we have to keep in mind. All right, let's dive into Ecclesiastes 1 through 3. I already gave you verse 2, but let's fill in some of the other context. And it says, "The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem." That's how Ecclesiastes starts out. "Absolute futility," says the teacher. "Absolute futility. Everything is futile. What does a person gain from all his efforts that he labors at under the sun?" Ecclesiastes 1 through 3. Now, I do believe that this letter, Ecclesiastes, is being written by King Solomon. King Solomon, many of you know, the son of David. King Solomon was the last ruler of the United Kingdom of Israel before the kingdom would split into a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. So King Solomon had a vast empire. He inherited a lot of the good things that his father David had established for him. And his empire was vast. His wealth was vast. The scripture says he was the wisest person to ever live. So King Solomon, of anybody on the face of the earth that could ever say, hey, if there was something under the sun that could really just hit the spot and really fulfill you in a way to really make this stuff make sense, if anybody could have ever said that, it would have been King Solomon. Because he had everything. He had the power, he had the position, he had a harem of like 700 women, right? He had like everything this world could offer. And yet, at the end of his life, Solomon is writing these words to us in the form of Ecclesiastes, and he comes to this grand conclusion that everything under the sun is just a futile pursuit. That should be a warning to us today, people. Maybe you're here today, right? Maybe you're a college student today. Maybe you're just beginning your career today. Maybe you've just reached some level in your career today where you're like, man, I have finally made it. I have finally reached that level that I've been striving for so long. And Solomon is warning us, and he's saying that if our vision for life is just life under the sun, and we're doing all these things to pursue these things of life as a means to an end, the wisest guy, the wealthiest guy, the person who had all the new technology of the day and had all the things that life has to offer, he's warning us and saying, man, that is a futile pursuit. It's actually a frustrating pursuit because you think that thing is gonna satisfy you on that soul level, and what ends up happening when you get that thing, then you just want the next thing. Then you just want the next thing. And it's like chasing after the wind, as we'll see in a second. It's a very futile pursuit. Now, I need to clarify again why we're looking at the first couple verses and the end, because I kind of skipped over that. But I do believe that this first part of the letter is written by King Solomon. But you'll notice in those first verses 1 through 11, the speaker, the teacher, if you will, he's speaking in the third person. He's referring to the teacher in the third person, right? The teacher says this. And then we'll see at the end of Ecclesiastes 12, the last couple of verses in the letter of Ecclesiastes goes back to referring to the teacher, the speaker in the third person form. Why would this be the case? And in the middle part of the book, it's from a first person personal memoir kind of perspective. And here's what I think is happening in the letter, right? It's King Solomon. He's the one who is writing this from beginning to end, but he's using a literary device. He's using a tool, if you will. He's presenting the window frames. He's setting the parameters of what his argument is going to be. So on one side of the equation, he's saying, look, there is a very real reality in this life. If you're going after the things of this world and you're trying to grab a hold of things in this life for the sake of those things as an end in themselves, it is going to leave you frustrated, disappointed, in despair, whatever adjective you want to use. And then as we'll see in Ecclesiastes 12, in the third person form again, the speaker is going to drill down on this other reality that is also true when he says, life is not just limited to activity under the sun. That we actually have a creator God that is above the sun, that actually provides meaning and purpose to life, because there is nothing that we do. There is no activity that is too big or too small. That he is not aware and watching and taking note. And one day we will be held accountable for those actions. So yes, within themselves, these activities can be really futile, really pointless. And yet the other reality is also true. There's nothing too small that God is not looking down and observing and seeing how we're going about living our life. And we will actually be brought into account one day for how we handle even those small things of life. All right, well, let's continue on. So Ecclesiastes 1 through 3, we began by that reality, that window frame that everything is futile, and then he's going to continue to unpack it. So just in case we have any doubts about that, listen to Ecclesiastes 1, 4 through 7. A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets, panting. It returns to the place where it rises. Gusting to the south, turning to the north, turning goes the wind. And the wind returns in its cycles. All the streams flow to the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. Ecclesiastes 1, 4 through 7. So he begins with this grand statement, right, of vanity of vanities, futile, everything is futile. And then he's saying, in case you have any questions about that, just look at the natural world. You think that the earth was created for humans. He's like, wrong. Look, generations come and go. Generations pass in a blink. And yet, look, we're going to be long gone. And that lawn is still going to need to be mowed. Grass is still going to be growing. That doesn't seem right. Like, that's a raw deal, right? Like, we're long gone, and the lawn is still needing to be taken care of. It's like, look at the wind. You go on a run and the wind is coming at your face, and then, the next day you turn around and go the other direction, the same stinking wind is coming at you from another direction still. How does that work? The futility of life. Look at the oceans, look at the water. How does this work? The rivers are just flowing steadily, like all the time. They're pouring into the ocean. Like, how does this ocean not fill up? The wisest guy to ever live, he's looking at the natural order of life. And he's like, well, if you think the natural order of life is frustrating, just think about the human existence. Ecclesiastes 1:8-11 says this: all things are wearisome, more than anyone can say. Have you ever felt that way? It's like you wake up on a Monday or you wake up on a Tuesday and it's like, man, life is just kind of wearing me out right now. Any moms in the house of 2 or 3 year olds, you know what this is like. Amen. All things are wearisome, more than anyone can say. The eye is not satisfied by seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Can one say about anything, look, this is new? It has already existed in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of those who came before, and of those who will come after, there will also be no remembrance by those who follow them. Ecclesiastes 1:8-11. Again, we're going to look at the other side of the framework, but on this side of the frame, of the window frame, before we look through this personal memoir of King Solomon as he's looking at all the incongruities of life, he just wants to put it out there. He's getting it on the table. That yes, underneath the sun, under the sun, there is a lot of life that is meaningless. There is a lot about life, of the inconsistencies and incongruities of life that, it's okay to express that. Sometimes life can be wearisome. And again, this is going to be a hopeful message, so hang in there. I know this all sounds quite like, the contrarians in the house are like, yeah, I knew it. I should have just stayed in the bed this morning. Yeah. No, there's hopefulness to this. But I think what Solomon is presenting to us is that balance in life is good. Not overvaluing or undervaluing things in life is important for us. Keeping things in perspective is important for us. Right? Because if life is just limited to activity under the sun, if life is just limited to our activity as an end within themselves, if you take that to its logical conclusion, it is a pretty depressing thing. There has to be more to life than just getting up and going to work every day. There has to be more to life than just the same old cyclical patterns of this life. And that's what the author is trying to get at. And by using the third person on the front, he's letting us know where that boundary is. And then the third person at the end, he's letting us know the other boundary, which is quite hopeful and good. Ecclesiastes 12:13-14. So let's skip to the end of the book, and we'll have to keep these two bookends in mind as we look at the letter over the next few weeks. But let me read Ecclesiastes 12:8 first, because this is the first time that it goes back from first person to third person, and it seems like he's leaving off where he started at the beginning. He says, absolute futility, says the teacher. Everything is futile. Not very hopeful. but continue on. Ecclesiastes 12:13 through 14 says this. Here's Solomon's grand conclusion as he looks through all the incongruities of life. He says, when all has been heard, the conclusion of the matter is this: fear God and keep his commands, because this is for all humanity. For God will bring every act to judgment. For God will bring every act to judgment, including every hidden thing, whether good or evil. Ecclesiastes 12:13 through 14. So on one side of the picture frame, on one side of the window frame, all right, under the sun, life can be pretty meaningless. It can be pretty pointless. There's going to be injustices in this world. There's going to be brokenness in this world that are just beyond our pay grade to try to ration those things out. And then on the other side of the equation, as we'll see over the next few weeks, he's going through all these topics of life that just don't add up all the time. And it's not that it's all despair. There's ebbs and flows through the letter, but it's important to remember where all of this is going to wind up. And he comes to this conclusion. Again, this is the wisest person. Solomon was the wisest person to ever live. He had everything that life had to offer him. He had all the accolades. His trophy case was like full. His bank account was maxed to the brim. He had territory beyond what he could comprehend. And this is the conclusion that he comes to: fear God and keep his commands, because this is for all humanity. For God will bring every act to judgment, including every hidden thing, whether good or evil. That's the grand conclusion. Life under the sun is meaningless. But we know life is not limited to life under the sun. We do have a sovereign God who is good. We do have a sovereign God that is in control, and He's aware. When we think about Psalms and we think about how God has created every single one of us, in our mother's womb, He handcrafted us for a reason. And that reason is for us to glorify Him. That reason is for us to live a life of purpose that goes beyond the activities of this life. It goes beyond the things that we're doing in this life. And it goes to the level of how are we going about doing these things? You see, we put so much time and attention and effort into, all right, if I could just accomplish this thing, or if I could just see this happen in my life, if I could just reach this level in my life. And by far greater measure, God is far more concerned with not the specific things that we're doing, but how we are going about living our life and doing those things. Because the fear of God is not, yes, there's a healthy respect, right, in our relationship with God. When we fear God, what Solomon is reminding us of is even the wisest person to ever live, even the person who had it all that this life could offer, he's saying that the wisest, the best thing that we can do is to live our life every day with a healthy respect, knowing that our life is under the sovereign and goodness of a God who created us, who has a plan and a purpose for us. And oh yeah, by the way, we'll stand face to face with our Maker one day, and we'll give an account for all the activities that we did for life under the sun. So the purpose, right, the substance of life is not found in the things that we acquire in this life, or the positions that we get to, or the things that we accomplish. The substance of this life is found in how we go about doing those things under the watchful eye of a God who created us, who loved us, who put gifts and talents in every single one of us. None of us are created just to fill up space and suck oxygen until we die. None of us. It doesn't matter if we're a school teacher. It doesn't matter if we're in retail. It doesn't matter if we're in business. It doesn't matter what the specifics are. God created us with a purpose in mind. And that purpose, despite all the different details of how life can flesh out, that purpose is for us to live our life every day cognizant of the fact that I do have a creator God that loves me, that's with me, that's walking with me, even in the heart of this life. And how I go about walking through the trials, how I go about walking through the joys of life is far more important than the specifics of what it is we're actually doing. So I want to just encourage us as we look at these topics over the next several weeks. We go through those seasons of life, right, where it feels like, man, am I doing anything right now that's actually making a difference in the world around me? Like, is my life actually leaving a mark? Is my life like, is there substance? Is there purpose? You know, there's not a day that goes by, I believe this to my core, there's not a day that goes by that our lives are not having an impact on somebody else's life. You know, every day somebody is watching your life. Somebody is watching my life every day. Whether it's a child or whether it's a coworker, whether it's a friend at school, there's not a day that goes by that people are not looking and observing our life. And this is a reminder that as we walk our life, as we live our life, with this idea of, man, you can boil all of life down to these two commands: fear God and keep His commands. Solomon says, you know, there's a lot of things that don't make sense, but this will never lead you astray, because God will bring into account all the actions, big or small. And I think we naturally go, you know, like depending on our kind of personalities and things. I was a PK growing up, you know, so I was always getting into trouble on various things. So I hear this of like, you know, God will bring an account or God will bring judgment, and it's like, oh man, like all the bad things that I've done, shucks. But I would challenge us to think the judgment of God is not, yes, God is a God of wrath, and He will call into account sinful activity. But when I think about the judgment of God, it's this idea of one day God's going to He's going to square up everything. He's going to call into account those things that have been wronged over our lives, right? So it's not just the idea of like, ooh, God's going to get you. It's also the fact that those little things that you do that you don't think anybody's paying attention to it. You don't think it matters. You don't think the way that you live your life just consistently in the small things, and it's like, man, this seems like a really difficult, this following Jesus life is really difficult and hard, and sometimes I don't know if this is really worth it. Is it really worth it to stand out, to live life against the grain? And the answer to that is yes, it is. Because we have a God that sees. And one day He's going to bring an account. He's going to square up all the things of this life, all the incongruities of this life, all the confusion of this life. God will square it up. And we live our lives in the hope of that. We've said it before, but hope is not wishful thinking, right? Hope is not, man, I hope this works out. Hope is the confident assurance that God is going to do what he says he's going to do. And why do we live our lives that way? Because of Resurrection Sunday, because of Easter, because Jesus walked out of the grave, because he's alive today. We have hope in the future because of what God has already done in Christ Jesus. So, we look at books like Ecclesiastes, and we look at Solomon and how he's looking at the world, and even Solomon is looking and he's aware that at someday God is going to make right all the broken, sad things in this world. Even Solomon was aware of that. And he was looking in anticipation of what God was going to do. We get the privilege of looking back on what God has already done. And that is the source of our hope. So as we journey through these next few weeks, and again, as we look at these topics that sometimes it's like, man, what's the point of going to work? Solomon's going to ask that question. What's the point of maintaining all these relationships? Solomon's going to answer that question. And he's going to do it based on these two realities that we've looked at today. That yes, life can oftentimes feel meaningless. Yes, the 8 to 5, the grinding it out, the toil of our human existence can sometimes be very frustrating. And yet, the other reality is true. The best thing that we can do is fear God, keep his commands, because there's not an action that we do, there's not a day that goes by, there's not a decision that we make that God is not aware of. And one day we will stand before him and give an account of our life. And that'll be a glorious day when we stand before our Creator God and evaluate and all those things that we felt like were just, I don't even know if I'm making a difference here. I don't know. This seems really hard right now. I'd rather just live life on my own terms and in my own way. Heed the words of Solomon. The wealthiest, wisest guy that ever lived comes to the end of his life and he says the best thing we can do, the best way to live life, and take my words because I've tried it all. I've tried it all. And the best way to live life is to fear God and to keep his commands. You can't really say you fear God and not keep his commands. That's why those two things go together. And just to remind us, hey, young people, sometimes we look at God's commands and it's like, I don't know, that's going to mess up all my fun. No, it's not. God is not a killjoy. His commands are for our life to flourish. We serve a loving God that meets us every day and helps us to walk in his ways, and we experience the abundant life that he has in store. Father, we come before you. We thank you for this really unusual book that you've given us through the wisest person that's ever lived, that looks at all the things of life, all the confusions of life that I know I've asked, and then reminds us that in all the little things of life and all the brokenness of life and all the frustrations of life, you are a God that reigns above the sun. And your hand impacts everything. So, Lord, I pray that you would help us as a people, Lord. I pray that you would help us in the confusions or in those seasons that are difficult and hard. Rather than just continuing to go about the doing of things, Lord, I pray that you would help us to be reminded of who you have created us to be. And that is to be your children, to enjoy relationship with you. That even in those dry seasons of life, Lord, you pour out your living water in us. And we are forever thankful. We love you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.